Hi, I'm Chase, 44, and I make fire pits for rich folks who confuse money with character. Last month, I watched my wife laugh while her boyfriend flicked a dollar bill at me, like I was the valet instead of her husband. 2 days later, she came home to find her house keys didn't work anymore, and Blake, her corporate Romeo, was blowing up her phone screaming. "You didn't tell me!" Didn't tell him what exactly? That I owned the company he worked for. That his paycheck came from the same man he humiliated. That karma has a forge, and I've been stoking its coals for years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind to the start of the detonation. I'm Chase Larkin, founder and owner of Larkin Custom Forges, which sounds fancy because it is. I make outdoor metalwork for rich people who like the idea of rustic charm without ever having touched a wrench. My work's been in magazines, featured at millionaire retreats, and probably cooked more $90 steaks than a 5-star chef. I love what I do. Always have. I also have 2 kids, Finn, 19, dangerously clever and sarcastic enough to carry a courtroom, and Maya, 14, professional eye roller with a mouth that could start a revolution. They're the only reason I hung on to my marriage longer than I should have. That and inertia. You get comfortable. You compromise. You convince yourself that shared history can outweigh growing distance. But cracks were forming. Lexi, my wife, had climbed the corporate marketing ladder so high she looked down on everything I did. My cute, little business. My soot-stained clothes. The steel in my beard and the grease on my knuckles. She wore suits that cost more than my monthly truck payment and started acting allergic to anything that didn't sparkle or praise her LinkedIn bio. And then came Blake. The coworker. The visionary. The man who apparently could do no wrong because he owned a bottle of cologne more expensive than our honeymoon. At first, it was subtle. Blake had a great idea. Blake thinks we should rebrand. Then suddenly, Blake was everywhere. Late meetings. Weekend strategy sessions. A girls' night that smelled suspiciously like cologne and catered steak. When I confronted her gently, I got gaslit. "You're insecure. It's work. I can't believe you don't trust me after everything." Trust. Right. Like the trust she shattered the night of the company party at the Belmont Grand. She made me go. Said it was critical for her image, that her boss needed to meet me. I showed up in my best suit. Polished my boots. Hell, I even rehearsed how to say, "Nice to meet you," without sounding like I wanted to be anywhere else. But none of it mattered. Because as soon as Blake walked in, Lexi transformed. Laughed louder. Flirted harder. Ignored me entirely. Then he did it. Reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp dollar bill, flicked it at me across the table, and said, "Don't worry, champ. I'll take good care of her tonight." The table erupted. Lexi laughed. And I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was a performance. I was the punchline. So I folded that dollar, slid it in my pocket, looked him dead in the eye and said, "You can keep her. Not just for tonight." Silence hit the table like an anvil. Lexi stopped laughing. Blake blinked. And I walked out of that hotel with the quiet calm of a man whose fuse had already burned out. She didn't come home that night. But when she did, her key didn't work. I'd changed the locks. I'd changed the rules. What followed was a masterclass in manipulation, her trying to lie about hotel charges I had already flagged, deflecting questions with curling iron excuses and pretending our marriage hadn't been turned into reality TV. But the worst part wasn't the cheating. It was discovering that she'd been funding her affair with my business account. See, Lexi thought I didn't check expenses closely. And she was right, until I handed everything over to my lawyer and a forensic accountant named Una, who had the demeanor of a librarian and the soul of a bounty hunter. Within hours, she found $38,000 in unauthorized charges. Spa days. Lingerie. Hotels. Steak dinners. And frequent transfers to an LLC called BH Ventures. BH. As in Blake Halpert. My wife had been siphoning money from my company to bankroll her boyfriend. But karma wasn't done yet. Because Blake? That smug, dollar-flipping sleazeball? He worked for me. He was the marketing director at my subsidiary company, Ironworks Outdoor Design, a division I'd purchased 5 years ago and barely paid attention to. Lexi had no idea. Neither did Blake. Until the day I sat at the head of the conference room table, called a mandatory division head meeting, and watched his soul leave his body when he walked in. That day, that was the beginning of a reckoning. And if you thought Blake's humiliation was the climax, buckle up. I hadn't even fired him yet. Blake sat there, frozen like a glitch in a PowerPoint presentation. The man who'd laughed with my wife while flicking $1 at her husband was now trying to remember how knees worked. I let the moment stretch. Let the silence simmer. The other division heads, Lucy from HR, Susan from Ops, Michael from Finance, looked from me to Blake like we were about to reenact a mob trial. I cleared my throat. Calm. Controlled. Good to see you again, Blake. Still handing out dollars? Or was that just a special occasion? He blinked. Mr. Larkin, I didn't know that I was your boss. That the man you disrespected owned the company signing your paychecks? That's what you didn't know, right? I reached into my wallet, slowly pulled out the now slightly crumpled $1, and slid it across the table toward him. It landed with a whisper and stopped in front of his overpriced leather portfolio. You left this behind. Thought you might want it back. Nobody breathed. Even Susan, who once fell asleep mid-meeting, was sitting upright like this was live theater. Blake stared at the $1 like it had teeth. Then tried the only thing cowards ever try, deflection. I didn't know she was married, she said. Stop. Just stop. You knew. You laughed. In my face. In public. In front of people I pay. Then you slept in a hotel I probably paid for, twice over. Lucy's mouth dropped open. Michael looked like he wanted to start clapping. You're fired, Blake. Effective immediately. Your conduct, inside and outside work, violates about a dozen clauses in your employment agreement. Lucy has your termination paperwork ready. Security will escort you out. You'll receive your final paycheck by mail, and no, there will be no severance. He tried to stand. I nodded. 2 guards were already waiting outside. Not big guys, but tall enough to ensure Blake didn't get any ideas about putting on a show. And Blake? He turned eyes wide pale. If you even think about wrongful termination, just know, I'd love to explain to a judge why you were funneling payments from my business through an LLC my wife set up for your consulting services. That's wire fraud. The kind that makes people very popular in federal prison. They took him out. His departure was slow, awkward, and completely silent, except for the hum of his own shame. His little ego parade ended with 2 security guys walking him past the receptionist, whose jaw was on the desk. And me? I sat back down. Turned to my staff. Meeting adjourned. The rest of the day was a blur of high fives, awkward chuckles, and emails with subjects like, whoa, and, thank you. Monica, my assistant, left a post-it on my desk that just said, respect the man with grease on his hands. But the Railwind came in court. Lexi tried to play innocent, showed up in navy blue like she was trying to interview for sympathy, complete with tired but brave makeup. Her lawyer painted her as the victim of my emotional distance, my lack of support, my cruel decision to lock her out. Claimed she was entitled to half my business, the same business she used to call my little metal hobby. Tom, my lawyer, wasn't having it. He handed Judge Brennan a binder the size of a microwave. Una's forensic accounting was meticulous. Every hotel charge, every lingerie purchase, every cent funneled into BH Ventures was documented and cross-checked. The judge read in silence. Her face slowly turned from curious to appalled. Then came the kill shot. Mrs. Larkin, Judge Brennan asked, were you aware that Mr. Halpert was employed by your husband? Lexi blinked. Stammered. Looked at her lawyer like she was hoping he had a fire alarm button under the table. Because that's what these documents suggest, Brennan continued. And yet you used marital funds to pay a man who was both your affair partner and your husband's employee. That's not just inappropriate. That's intentional deception. Lexi looked like she'd swallowed a stapler. Then came the verdict. I kept the house. I kept both divisions of the business. I got full custody of the kids, with Lexi receiving standard visitation. She was ordered to repay the misused funds, pay my legal fees, and receive nothing in spousal support. She walked out of that courtroom looking like someone who lost a game she didn't even know she was playing. But it didn't end there. 6 months later, I was sitting in my shop working on a new design when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lexi standing on the porch in faded sweatpants and flip-flops, with her Civic idling behind her like a dying animal. She started with apologies. Then pivoted to nostalgia. Then therapy. Then tears. I didn't say much. Just listened. Waited. Then she dropped the line. "Can't we just start over?" I pointed to her Civic. "That car make a new noise just now." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Oh. Yeah. It's the transmission. But that's not why I came." "It is, though. You came here because you need help. Because Blake is gone. Because you've burned every bridge. And because I was always the one who fixed things, right?" She didn't deny it. "But I'm not your safety net anymore." I paused. "I'm your lesson." She left. The Civic stalled twice before lurching down the street. I watched it go, leaking something expensive the whole way. Later that night, Finn texted, "Mom says you left her on the curb like yesterday's Amazon box. Respect." I laughed. Then framed the dollar bill. Hung it in my office above a custom plaque I forged myself. "Respect the man with grease on his hands. He probably signs your paycheck." And business? Oh, business was booming. The Loyalty series became our flagship line, each fire pit engraved with "Don't get burned." Backlog into next year. Clients lining up. Because nothing sells like integrity with a side of iron. But there's still one more reckoning. One more ember smoldering in the forge. Because Blake wasn't the only one who underestimated me. My revenge wasn't over. It was just heating up. 3 weeks after the courtroom turned my marriage into a smoldering crater and my ex-wife into a cautionary tale, I got a phone call that changed the tone of this entire saga. "Mr. Larkin?" The voice was tight, corporate, and vaguely British, which is the international accent for legal trouble incoming. "This is Angela Morton, General Counsel for Venture Edge Outdoor Products. We'd like to discuss a potential liability issue involving one of your former employees." Now, if that name doesn't ring a bell, here's the twist. Venture Edge was Blake Halpert's new employer. Yeah. That guy. The one who got fired for humiliating his boss and sleeping with his boss's wife, then lied on his resume and got hired at a competing firm. I don't know how he managed it. Maybe he sold them on that fake charm. Maybe his hair hypnotized someone. But they gave him a fancy title and a budget. And within 2 months he managed to burn it all down. According to MS. Morton, Blake had attempted to replicate my Loyalty series designs under the Venture Edge brand. Same materials. Same core structure. Nearly identical engraving, minus my company name. Blake called it the Integrity Line. The irony alone should have triggered a trademark lawsuit. Turns out, one of my longtime clients spotted a promo ad, recognized the design, and tipped off my company. Una, the forensic accountant turned company bulldog, followed the paper trail and traced it right back to Blake. But before we could file a cease and desist, Venture Edge called me, practically begging for mercy. Turns out they'd done their own internal audit and realized Blake had not only stolen designs, he'd billed personal dinners, client gifts, red spa packages, and a $4,000 innovation retreat to company cards. Translation: he went full Blake. Again. Angela said, in the most lawyerly way possible. "We regret the hire." I said, "No regrets here." Then came the question that made me sit up straighter than a steel beam. "Mr. Larkin, would you be interested in acquiring the outdoor division of Venture Edge?" Hold on. Me? Acquire them? Venture Edge had recently been struggling. Their parent company was cutting costs, and thanks to Blake's misadventures and a tanking reputation, the board was looking to quietly sell off underperforming assets. They needed someone with credibility, a strong brand, and cash flow. Enter yours truly. I called Tom. He laughed for a full minute, then said, "We're not just ending this with dignity, Chase. We're gonna buy their soul." Negotiations took 2 months. Quiet. Clean. And when the ink dried, I owned 100% of what used to be Blake's shiny new office. Let me paint the picture. One Monday morning in early spring, I pulled into Venture Edge's sleek glass building in my beat-up Ford truck, the same one Lexi used to say was not brand appropriate for networking events. I parked diagonally across 2 luxury EVs and strolled inside wearing jeans, a black work shirt with my name stitched over the heart, and steel-toe boots. The receptionist looked confused. I handed her a folder. Delivery for Blake Halpert. Inside? A single document. Mr. Halpert's services are no longer required by the newly acquired ownership group of this division. Effective immediately. Security has been notified. No signature. Just a stamped engraving across the bottom. Don't get burned. I never saw Blake's exit in person. But security told me he went down swinging, yelling about conspiracies, favoritism, legacy sabotage. Claimed I was obsessed with ruining his life. Buddy, you ruined your own life. I just owned the building where it happened. And here's where it got poetic. The board wanted to rebrand the outdoor product line. They asked for name suggestions. I pitched one. Just one. The Dollar Series. Every piece engraved with a stylized number 1 and a quote. You can keep her, not just for tonight. It was subtle, elegant, and devastatingly effective. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. Clients laughed. Orders doubled. Retailers called it the most savage rebrand of the year. Lexi heard about it through Finn. Mom says it's embarrassing and petty. He texted me. I replied, it's profitable. Then came the part one didn't expect. About 2 weeks into the new acquisition, I started noticing emails in our customer inbox. All from women. Women married to guys like me. Small business owners. Welders. Landscapers. HVAC techs. Guys with grit under their nails and honesty in their bones. Their messages weren't about fire pits. They were about recognition. My husband cried when I showed him your site. He said it's the first time someone like him was treated like a hero instead of a punchline. I bought one for my dad. He was the one everyone laughed at, until they needed their car fixed or their house painted. Thank you for making something for us. The blue-collar guys. The good men. The loyal ones. Those messages hit harder than any court win. Stronger than any dollar revenge. Because I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was our story. The story of every man who gets underestimated, overlooked, or laughed at because they don't fit some Instagram-filtered fantasy of luxury. Every man who gets cheated on, disrespected, and still wakes up the next day to put in honest work. I leaned into it. Hired a local videographer. Shot a promo featuring welders, electricians, mechanics, firefighters. Real men. Real lives. Tagline. Built by hands that never stopped holding the line. That campaign? Tripled our orders. And Lexi? Oh, Lexi saw it all. Finn said she called it emotional manipulation wrapped in toxic masculinity. I call it marketing. But here's where the fuse really hit the powder keg. One day, 6 months post-divorce, I got an official-looking envelope addressed to Chase Larkin, proprietor, Larkin Custom Forges and Affiliates. Inside? A notice of civil arbitration. Filed by none other than Sasha, Lexi's sister. You remember Sasha? The divorced 2-time feminist revolutionary who inspired Lexi to embrace her power. Yeah, that one. She was suing me for defamation of family character. Apparently, my products, specifically the Dollar Series, were causing her emotional distress and contributing to a toxic narrative against women who pursue their happiness. You want to know the best part? She was representing herself. I called Tom, who laughed so hard he actually wheezed. Then he sent a one-line response to the arbitration court. The dollar was Blake's. The disrespect was mutual. The ownership? 100% Chase Larkin. No court would touch it. No judge would hear it. The case was dismissed in 2 days. But the ripple effects? Oh, they were glorious. Lexi stopped getting invited to corporate events. Blake's name became industry poison. And Sasha, last I heard, was trying to start a wellness podcast about reclaiming financial sovereignty, which ironically began with a GoFundMe campaign. Me? I built a second forge. Doubled my staff. Started hosting veteran-led welding workshops on weekends. Maya helps with social media. Finn wants to come on full-time after college. The Larkin name? It means something now. And that dollar? Still framed on the wall. Not as a memory of humiliation, but as a receipt. Because every man who's ever been underestimated deserves to keep one thing. Proof. It's been a year. Lexi moved out of state. Rumor says she's starting over in Scottsdale, working some marketing job with a quarter the pay and none of the perks. Finn says she still asks about me sometimes. I don't ask back. Blake disappeared into Florida somewhere. Venture Edge blacklisted him. His LinkedIn quietly deleted. Sometimes I check just to make sure it's still gone. It always is. Brings me joy. But I didn't come here to gloat. Not just that. See, after the fallout, after the court wins and the product line booms, something unexpected happened. My story, the guy who got laughed at, disrespected, cheated on, and still came out with the receipts, went viral. Not just TikTok clips and subreddit reposts. Actual interviews. Men's journals. Podcasts. The man who forged his divorce into a brand. They called me a symbol. I'm not. I'm just a guy who got tired of pretending everything was okay. But here's where it gets real. A few months ago, I got an email from a nonprofit in Kansas. We work with men in trades, veterans, welders, fabricators, guys who've been chewed up by life and left behind. Your story gave them hope. Would you come speak? I hate public speaking. But I went. I walked into a warehouse full of guys who looked like me. Grease-stained hands. Worn boots. Tired eyes. But when I finished my story, from the dollar flick to the courtroom to Blake's firing, the room exploded. Laughter, applause, fist bumps. One guy came up crying. Said he hadn't seen his kids in a year. Said my story gave him the guts to fight back. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me. I started a scholarship. The Loyalty Fund. Helps cover tools, certifications, travel for blue-collar workers trying to rebuild. It's small. But growing. My Forge? Bigger than ever. Maya redesigned the website. Finn runs logistics. I just weld, mentor, and drink terrible black coffee while pretending to hate the new playlist they force on me. Lexi tried emailing me once more. Subject. Closure. I didn't open it. Some things don't deserve a second read. The dollar's still framed in my office. Clients ask about it. I just say, it's the best investment I ever made. Because sometimes, the most humiliating moment of your life becomes the cornerstone of your legacy. Sometimes, when someone throws money at you, they don't realize they're funding your comeback. So yeah? She left me at a party. He threw $1 at me. I built an empire with it.